Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're jumping into a really fascinating exploration of B2B sales touchpoints and, the ever-evolving buyer's journey. We're pulling insights from a great article someone shared.
Yeah, it's such a crucial topic because, let's face it, closing a B2B sale, it's not like buying a coffee, is it?
Definitely not.
It's a whole process. Often requires, well, many interactions. The source actually highlights it takes more than 8 touch points on average to seal a deal.
Wow, more than 8.
Yeah.
That's quite a few chances to get it right or, well, to get it wrong.
Exactly.
And the challenge isn't just, staying visible across those 8+ interactions.
Yeah.
It's using the right touch point with the right message at the right time to actually help the buyer move forward.
That's the core of it. So our mission in this deep dive is really to unpack what these sales touch points actually are.
Okay.
And understand why strategically mapping them to the buyer journey is, well, it's no longer optional, really. And figure out how to make those interactions genuinely effective. Less random noise, more guided progress.
Makes sense. So this deep dive is specifically designed for you, the listener, to sort of cut through all that complexity and get to the core understanding of how to improve that buying experience for your customers and ultimately, move deals through the pipeline more smoothly.
Okay, let's unpack this.
All right. So first things first, let's clarify what we mean by sales touchpoints in this specific context.
Good idea.
These are the specific interactions driven by a sales representative, the rep with a buyer.
Okay.
Think the initial email response after they download something, maybe a targeted LinkedIn message, that first discovery call.
The demo?
The demo, absolutely. The proposal review, even the contract negotiation right at the end, all rep-driven interactions.
Got it. So these are distinct from, the broader universe of buyer touchpoints, like reading a company blog or downloading an ebook or just browsing the website. Exactly. Those often happen earlier, maybe more in the awareness stage, often handled by marketing efforts.
Right.
Sales typically jumps in more directly from, say, the consideration phase onwards, once there's a clear signal of interest or maybe a direct conversation has started. From that point on, pretty much every proactive rep interaction, that's a sales touch point. And yeah, ideally, these align with those classic stages we talk about: awareness, consideration, and decision.
But here's where it gets really interesting, I think, and where the source kind of challenges the old way of thinking. The buyer journey is rarely, if ever, linear. It's not just A to B to C. And it's definitely not the same for every single customer, is it?
Absolutely not. And that nonlinearity, that messiness, is exactly why mapping becomes essential. You might have seen those neat buyer journey charts online.
Yeah, all perfectly laid out.
Right. But the chart referenced in this article, it's intentionally blank for a reason. You have to map your specific customer's reality, not some generic ideal.
And this ties into a pretty eye-opening statistic from the source. I think you mentioned it earlier.
Yeah, the study finding that only 32.5%, just about a third, of companies felt they were doing a good job creating a competitive buying experience.
Only a third. That's a massive gap, isn't it?
It's huge. And you see it, right? In those stalled deals, prospects going dark, missed revenue targets.
So what's going on? What's causing that huge disconnect between what buyers seem to need and what companies are actually providing?
Well, a big part of it, this source argues pretty strongly, is that many sales motions are still fundamentally seller-led, still stuck in the past almost.
Seller-led, meaning
they're designed to push the buyer through a rigid, predetermined sales funnel, using the same assets, the same sequence for basically everyone, regardless of where that buyer actually is in their thinking or what they already know.
which just completely clashes with how buyers operate today, doesn't it?
Totally. They've often done tons of research before they even dream of talking to sales.
Right, they might have multiple stakeholders involved from the get-go.
Exactly. And they have, frankly, zero patience for generic information or being walked through steps they figured out weeks ago.
They just don't move in those neat, predictable steps that the old funnel kind of assumed.
Precisely. So the real power of mapping isn't just, drawing a nice diagram for a presentation. It's about building a system that reflects how your actual best fit buyers really buy things.
Okay.
And that allows you to strategically place the right touch points to help them progress, but crucially, on their terms.
And that sounds like the key to personalization that actually works, that scales.
Yeah.
The source talked about this, right? How mapping enables that. You gave the example earlier, like for a mid-market IT lead.
Yeah, exactly. For that specific person, maybe they're in the consideration phase. You wouldn't just send them the generic company deck you send everyone.
Right. Useless.
Based on your map, the right touch point might be a really relevant case study, showing how you helped a similar IT team, maybe one just like theirs, overcome specific security challenges they care about.
Right.
Or maybe it's a short video, like 2 minutes, directly answering an implementation question they brought up on the last call. It's guided selling.
Guided selling. I like that.
Yeah, it builds on what they already know, it checks their understanding, it fills in specific gaps they have, and it provides content that helps them feel, confident moving towards making a decision.
And for this mapping to be really effective, it sounds like it needs to be driven by actual data, not just gut feelings about what works.
Oh, absolutely. Using real data is critical. Things like how long deals typically take for different customer segments,
Okay.
which specific assets actually get engagement, and more importantly, which ones seem to move deals forward. Or when do common objections usually pop up in the cycle? Using that kind of data makes your touch points exponentially better.
So you can start with a template, maybe, but then you absolutely have to customize it based on how your real customers behave.
You got it. The more data you feed into this process, the more precise, the more effective your touch points become over time.
And what's fascinating here, I think, is that the real goal isn't just about making sales more efficient for the seller. It's actually about reducing friction for the buyer.
That's the ultimate aim. The best maps, they anticipate what's likely to slow a buyer down, what are the common roadblocks, and then you proactively build touch points to clear those obstacles before they become major issues.
Yeah, you give an example.
Sure. Think about enterprise deals. If you know legal review consistently adds, say, 2 weeks to the timeline.
Which it often does.
Right. You can build that timing into your map. And you schedule a touch point maybe a bit earlier to brief your internal champion on what legal will need. Or you provide necessary documentation proactively. You get ahead of it.
Okay, that makes sense. Proactive.
Or another one. If you notice buyers often get hesitant right after they see the pricing.
Yeah, sticker shock.
Exactly. Your map could trigger a follow-up touch point automatically. Maybe with a tailored ROI calculator showing the payback period. Or perhaps a success story focused specifically on the value delivered, addressing those cost concerns head on.
What about, say, prospects entering a new market? They might be unsure.
Good point. Mapping might reveal they need a bit more hand-holding around implementation specifics, so you could add a touch point, maybe a pre-close walkthrough video focusing on onboarding, or perhaps a detailed FAQ sheet addressing common setup questions for newcomers.
That kind of foresight. It doesn't just, grease the wheels. It builds enormous trust, doesn't it?
It really does, and as the source points out, it directly helps shorten those sales cycles.
So let's talk practicalities. How can teams actually improve these touch points, especially in those stages sales typically owns, like consideration through decision?
Yeah, okay. A key piece of advice from the source is really recognizing and then documenting the patterns within your ICP, your ideal customer profile.
Right, the type of customer who gets the most value.
Exactly. What are their common behaviors? What questions do they always ask? What objections do they typically raise? And when do they raise them?
Okay, so looking for those recurring themes.
Yes, because this lets you build playbooks. You learn that, for instance, mid-market prospects in, say, the finance sector always ask for a specific type of security compliance stock before they'll involve their VP.
Gotcha.
So, your touchpoint map ensures that document is ready and delivered proactively, maybe right after the first demo, at the perfect moment.
And the goal here isn't necessarily completely unique, bespoke interaction every single time, right?
Yeah.
It's customized.
Precisely. Custom without reinventing the wheel. Personalization here means maybe dropping in relevant stats you discussed on a previous call.
Or referencing a specific goal they mentioned.
Exactly. Or providing content that directly answers a question they just asked you. The touchpoint needs to feel genuinely helpful, like you're guiding them, specifically, not just ticking a box on your sales checklist.
And timing. This seems critical. The article emphasizes timing it around their world, not just your schedule.
Hugely important. What's actually happening on their side? Are they nearing the end of a quarter or a budget cycle deadline?
Is there a big leadership change happening?
Or a board meeting coming up they need info for? A timely, relevant touch point that acknowledges their reality, maybe even referencing a recent company announcement they made, is just exponentially more impactful than a generic, hey, just checking an email.
Yeah, that checking an email is the worst.
It really is. So don't just send something because it's Tuesday and it's on your cadence. Send it because it's genuinely relevant today for them.
And when you do send something, like content, the source stresses.
Yes.
Always give context.
Yes. Don't just forward a link to a white paper and expect them to figure it out.
Please don't.
Explain why you're sending it and why it matters to them right now. Something like, hey, sending this along because page 4 specifically addresses that integration challenge you mentioned on our call.
Okay. That's much better than just sharing this white paper I thought you'd like.
World's better. It shows you listened, you remembered, and it justifies asking for their time to look at it.
And finally, a crucial point. Every touch point needs a clear call to action, a CTA.
Absolutely. Don't leave the buyer hanging, wondering what's supposed to happen next. Guide them.
So be explicit, like review this section and let me know if you have questions.
Yeah, or can you share this document internally with the finance team? Or here's the link to book our next 15-minute call to discuss. Even a softer nudge works, like maybe consider bringing Sarah from marketing into our next discussion. She might find the demo of the campaign features valuable. Just provide clear direction.
Okay, so once you have this map, this understanding, your outreach fundamentally shifts, doesn't it?
Completely. It's no longer just guesswork or random acts of sales. You're meeting buyers where they actually are strategically.
And the focus, especially in that mid-funnel consideration stage, becomes staying top of mind, but effectively, with the right format, message, and timing tailored to their likely needs right then. Let's talk channels then. The article mentions phone calls, for example. It says they aren't really working for cold outreach like they maybe once did.
Yeah, that's the finding. Cold calls have a tough time now, but phones are still very effective mid-journey.
Yeah.
After you've had some initial engagement, maybe via email or LinkedIn, then a call is great to clarify priorities, dive deeper into a specific challenge they raised, or answer complex questions that are just awkward over email.
And email itself, still a workhorse, I imagine.
Definitely still a workhorse, but with the caveat that it absolutely has to be personal and relevant.
Right.
To reference their specific actions, maybe they attended a webinar or downloaded a guide, mention challenges they brought up, and crucially, link content that directly answers questions they're likely grappling with at that specific stage in their journey.
And always add that context piece we talked about.
Always. Explain why you're sending this piece of content now.
What about LinkedIn? How does that fit in?
LinkedIn's a really good sort of lighter touch option. You can sprinkle it in between calls and emails. It does require the sales rep to actually have an active, professional digital presence, of course.
Sure, it can't just be a blank profile.
Right. And the messages should generally be shorter, more concise than emails. Often, the main CTA on LinkedIn is about scheduling that next call or a demo.
But across all these channels, phone, email, LinkedIn, whatever the huge challenge is, just breaking through the noise, right? Buyers are absolutely bombarded.
Totally inundated. If your message doesn't land at the right moment with that essential context making it immediately relevant, it just disappears into the void, gets archived or deleted instantly.
So the source offers some timing tips.
It does. One interesting idea is to sort of front-load your efforts. Once a lead shows serious interest, maybe put more of your planned touch points earlier in the process.
Why?
The thinking is it helps enrich the lead faster, get more information, and potentially speed up that initial qualification. Get them from interested to genuinely qualified more quickly.
But carefully. Right. Not just blasting them.
Oh, absolutely. They caution against just bombarding them. It's about building a comfortable, helpful cadence, not an annoying one.
They give an example cadence, I think.
Yeah, a basic one might look like day 1, maybe an email with a really relevant resource like a targeted blog post. Day 3 could be a lighter LinkedIn touch, maybe engage with one of their posts, or send a quick personalized note.
Okay.
Then maybe day 5, another personalized email, perhaps referencing something specific they did, like downloading a particular case study from your site and asking a relevant question about it.
And underpinning all this, the message is, let data guide your pace.
Yes. Timing is definitely not one size fits all. The right cadence for a large enterprise CIO considering $1 million deal is going to be very different from a small business owner looking at a monthly subscription.
So look at your history.
Exactly. Use your historical CRM data. How many touches does it typically take for a lead in the segment to become marketing qualified, and MQL? How long, on average, does it then take for that MQL to become sales qualified and SQL? How many touch points usually happen between SQL and closing the deal?
Oh,
That
but
data gives you a solid baseline. It helps you build much smarter, more realistic cadences instead of just guessing.
so this all sounds great in theory.
Mm-hmm.
How does someone actually start building their own touchpoint map and cadence? Where do you begin?
Yeah, good question. The advice is definitely to start simple. Don't try to map out, hundreds of complex scenarios right away.
Keep it manageable.
Exactly. A good rule of thumb suggested in the article is maybe building an initial sequence of around 10 well-paced touch points,
Okay, 10.
spread across multiple channels, email, LinkedIn, maybe a call or two, over, say, 5 to 6 weeks. That could be a solid starting point for a typical mid-funnel prospect, someone who's shown interest but isn't ready to buy yet.
And think carefully about the sequence of those 10 touches.
Very thoughtfully. The source gives an example sequence for that mid-funnel prospect. Maybe it starts with an email sharing a really relevant case study. Then a few days later, a LinkedIn engagement like or comment on their post, followed by an email with maybe a short, helpful video addressing a common pain point.
Okay.
Then maybe a LinkedIn message inviting them to a webinar that's highly relevant to their role or industry. A follow-up call after the webinar to discuss key takeaways. Perhaps an email with a competitive comparison guide if they're evaluating options. Another call later to discuss specific objections or create some urgency around timing. You get the idea.
Yeah, a logical progression.
And crucially, tailor these cadences. Don't use the exact same sequence for everyone. Group similar buyer personas or industries together.
Ask yourself questions about that group.
Right. For this group, what are their typical objections? What kind of content do they find most useful or credible? What's the usual length of the sales cycle for companies like this? Then build cadences that actually fit those specific patterns.
So the cadence for a fast-moving tech startup might be quicker, maybe more digital channels.
Could be lots of email and LinkedIn, maybe shorter calls, whereas for, say, a healthcare organization.
More cautious, maybe?
Exactly. Maybe the cadence is a bit longer, includes more content focused on compliance and security, uses more formal customer testimonials, and involves more scheduled formal calls rather than quick check-ins.
And map the content to each specific touch point too, right? Based on where they likely are mentally.
Yes, precisely. Match the content to the buyer's likely mindset at that moment in the journey. Early on, maybe it's thought leadership, industry trends, problem awareness content.
Mid-journey.
Mid-journey is probably more about ROI calculators, competitive comparisons, specific use cases relevant to them.
And near the close.
Near the close, it's often things like detailed customer testimonials, security documentation, implementation guides, procurement FAQs, the stuff they need for that final sign-off.
So when you map the cadence, the channel, and the content together, that's when the outreach stops feeling like a generic sales sequence you're just running through.
It starts feeling like a valuable, guided conversation that's actually helping the buyer navigate their decision.
Makes total sense. So ultimately, what's the real impact of making this shift, moving to these more strategic, buyer-centric touch points?
Well, the impact can be pretty significant. Every single interaction then becomes a meaningful opportunity to actually advance the deal, not just check in.
And getting that right touch point at the right moment, tailored to their specific needs. The source suggests it can really speed things up.
Yeah, dramatically speed up sales cycles. In some cases, it helps build trust, often without needing dozens of extra meetings, and it positions your brand less like just another vendor trying to sell something.
And more like the obvious partner who understands them.
Exactly, the one who gets it.
It really does reinforce that central idea.
Yeah.
It's not about scamming people or just hitting some arbitrary activity quota.
Not at all. It's about thoughtfully creating a clear path. A path that helps the buyer make their decision, providing them with content and information that feels specifically relevant and valuable exactly when they seem to need it most.
And using data, not just guesswork, to guide the timing, the content, the cadence. That seems to be the key to getting better results, with, frankly, less wasted effort.
Absolutely. Data-driven decisions are crucial here. The source also gives a nod to how modern sales technology can really support this.
How so?
Well, Tools can offer insights from recorded calls, automatically track buyer engagement with the content you send.
Ah, see if they actually open the attachment.
Right. They can integrate with your CRM and email client, making it seamless. Some tools can even recommend the most relevant content to send based on the conversation context, or even help draft more personalized email using AI. It helps scale the personalization.
Right. Take some of the manual work out of it while keeping it relevant.
Exactly.
Okay. So wrapping up this deep dive then, we've really explored how moving beyond just generic follow-ups to truly strategic sales touchpoints is essential today. Guided by really understanding and mapping the actual buyer journey and leveraging data to make it all work. It seems crucial for navigating the, let's face it, complex world of B2B sales now.
It really is. It's fundamentally about being helpful, being timely, and being deeply relevant to the buyer's world and their process.
It feels like a necessary shift, moving away from that maybe outdated seller-led push process.
Definitely. Towards a genuinely buyer-centric approach, one that anticipates needs and proactively removes friction from their buying process.
So here's maybe a final thought for you, the listener, to mull over. Given how nonlinear, how buyer-led these journeys are in B2B today, think about the companies you interact with, maybe as a buyer yourself.
Interesting angle.
Where do their touch points or processes sometimes feel, well, out of sync? Where do they create friction for you? And thinking about that, where might your interactions with them need to adapt to better align with how you actually prefer to research, evaluate, and ultimately buy?
Yeah, turning the lens around, it's a good way to think about the same challenge from the other side.
Definitely food for thought. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Always a pleasure. Always more to learn.
Indeed. Until next time.